You can't have those. They're for the garden club. My mother, Eleanor, didn't just say it, she hissed it, snatching a plate of fresh, steaming lemon ricotta pancakes away before my 7-year-old son could even extend a fork. The air in her sun-drenched breakfast nook smelled of expensive espresso and $80 candles, but all I could taste was the familiar, metallic tang of resentment. Across the mahogany table, her friends, women in silk scarves and pearls, were daintily nibbling on smoked salmon tartines. My kids, Leo and Mia, sat huddled in their chairs, their eyes tracking the food like hungry hawks. Then came the toss. With a practiced flick of her wrist, Eleanor slid a single, open sleeve of generic, saltine crackers toward them. They skidded across the marble, stopping right at the edge. This should hold them over, she said, her voice dropping into that performative, sweet-as-poison register she used for an audience. We have to be mindful of the pantry, Natalie. Your kids can eat a real meal when they get home. Drop a comment and let me know, have you ever been treated like a second-class citizen in your own childhood home? I want to hear your stories. That I sat there, frozen. The old script screamed at me to stay silent. Don't embarrass her. She's struggling on a fixed income. Just take the crackers. But then I looked out the window. Sitting in the driveway was a brand new, white pearl SUV. The window sticker was still practically visible. My mother had been borrowing $1,000 a month from me for her heart medication. And yet, my children were being fed scraps while she hosted a feast. That wasn't a budget issue. It was an eviction notice for my patients that I was the responsible one. The daughter who never caused a scene, the one who stayed late at the office to ensure the wire transfer to my mother's account never arrived a day late. For 3 years, I had been the silent architect of her survival. I skipped my own dental appointments and told my kids we were having camping nights in the living room because the heater was broken. Also, I could cover Eleanor's uninsured medical expenses and her mounting property taxes. You're so reliable, Natalie, she would say, usually while I was scrubbing her baseboards or organizing her mail. It wasn't a compliment, it was a tether. It was her way of reminding me that my strength was only valuable if it served her fragility, but as I sat there watching her friends laugh, the architecture of the last 3 years began to crumble. I looked at Eleanor, perfectly coiffed, glowing in a cashmere sweater that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. She was complaining about the rising cost of landscaping, while my daughter, Mia, tried to make a sandwich out of 2 dry saltines that IT hit me then, cold and sharp. My mother wasn't struggling. She wasn't drowning. She was luxury lining her nest with the feathers she'd plucked from mine. She needed me to feel poor. She needed me to believe she was 1 bill away from the street so I wouldn't look too closely at the feast. I had been funding my own children's deprivation, and the realization felt like a physical blow to the chest. The shift happened at 2 p.m., right after the last guest trailed out with a leftover tartine my mother practically forced into her designer bag. Eleanor had headed upstairs for her recovery nap, leaving her tablet glowing on the kitchen island. She'd been complaining all morning about her confusing tax documents, begging me to take a look that I didn't just look. I dived. The screen was a graveyard of my own sacrifices. I found the banking app, but the numbers staring back at me weren't the pension scraps she'd cried about over the phone. There were 2 accounts. One was the pity account where my monthly transfers sat like stagnant water. The other was a survivor benefit plan I never knew existed, paired with a high-yield trust my father had meticulously built for his grandchildren's future. My heart didn't just race, it turned into a rhythmic thud of pure, cold clarity. I scrolled through the ledger of her survival. July, $4,000 for home aesthetics, the Italian marble. August, $12,000 for personal adornment, the vintage Chanel brooch she wore today. Every month, $3,000 to a wealth management group, while I was charging Mia's school shoes to a high-interest credit card. She hadn't been drowning. She'd been a professional diver, siphoning the oxygen from my children's lungs to inflate her own ego. I wasn't just a daughter anymore. I was a forensic accountant of my own betrayal, and I began taking screenshots of every single cent she'd stolen from the dead to feed the vanity of the living. The garden club ladies were gone, leaving behind only the scent of expensive lilies and the wreckage of a feast. Eleanor was lounging on the sofa, scrolling through photos of herself from the brunch, her face a mask of smug satisfaction. The nerve of some people, she sighed, not looking up. The florist tried to overcharge me. Honestly, Natalie, I don't know how I'm going to make ends meet this month. I might need a little extra for the heater. I didn't say a word. I just walked over and slid my phone onto the coffee table, right over her curated photos. On the screen was the bank statement, the one showing the $12,000 jewelry withdrawal and the $50,000 trust fund hold. Eleanor's face went from a flush of vanity to a terrifying shade of gray. Her mouth opened, but the practiced, poor widow script died in her throat. The arrogance evaporated, leaving behind a frightened, caught woman. That was for the family legacy, she stammered, her voice trembling. I was maintaining our image. Our image? I laughed. It was a short, dry sound that felt like breaking glass. You stole from my children's education to buy pearls. You fed them crackers while you donated $10,000 to the opera. I stepped closer, my voice flat and cold as steel. I've already contacted the trust attorney. The accounts are being frozen this afternoon. You have 30 days to sell the SUV and replenish every stolen cent, or I'm filing a police report for embezzlement. You said my kids can eat when they get home? Well, you better start packing, because this house isn't a home. It's a crime scene. The fallout was swift, a quiet implosion of a life built on stolen pedestals. Eleanor tried the old tactics first, the frantic phone calls to relatives, the tearful posts about unfilial daughters, the claims that I was financially abusing a widow. But I didn't just have feelings, I had spreadsheets. One mass email to the family with the PDF attachments of her jewelry investments silenced the flying monkeys permanently. She sold the SUV. She liquidated the Chanel collection. She even moved out of the estate and into a modest condo, finally living on the fixed income she'd lied about for years. She avoided a courtroom, but she couldn't avoid the mirrors.as for me. I didn't go on a spending spree with the returned funds. I sat in my home office, the one I used to hide in to cry about bills, and I paid off every cent of the high-interest debt I'd taken on to save her. Then, I set up untouchable, ironclad education bonds for Leo and Mia that I took them out to dinner that Friday. A real dinner. No scraps, no generic crackers, no shame. I watched my son dive into a plate of pancakes with a grin that reached his eyes, and I realized my father hadn't left me a victim. He'd left me the truth. I just had to be brave enough to find the latch that I'm not the fixer anymore. I'm the architect. And I've built a wall of protection around my children that no amount of guilt can climb. If you've finally broken the cycle of being the family's trash can, share your story in the comments. This is Justice Valley.